Secrets from the Masters, 1992. Stevie Ray Vaughan. He didn't just play his guitar, he mauled it, as evidenced by the non-existent finish and quarter-inch deep scratches on the face of his battered 59 Fender Strat. By the end of a Stevie Ray Vaughan set, he would have played the guitar behind his head, off his shoulder like a violin, behind his back, and on the floor, standing over the cutaways with one hand firmly on the guitar's neck, the other pulling up on the vibrato bar. By the end of his life, in a tragic helicopter accident following a concert while on tour with Eric Clapton and Robert Cray, Stevie Ray had won the adulation of a world of fans, but more importantly, the respect of his very mentors, Hubert Sumlin, Albert Collins, Lonnie Mack, and Buddy Guy, to name just a few. While making vintage guitar collectors wince and teachers moan, Stevie Ray gave the biggest exposure in years to one of the most fundamental but unsung musical forms, the blues. And with every achievement and accolade he received after he burst onto the charts on David Bowie's critically acclaimed album, Let's Dance, he shared his honors with the bluesmen who preceded him and with the genre itself. Most of all, I'm glad to see the blues getting the recognition it deserves, he emphasized on more than one occasion. After being lifted out of the Austin, Texas blues scene to play on Let's Dance, Stevie Ray went back to his hometown group, Double Trouble, and teamed up with A&R legend John Hammond to produce Texas Flood, which took top honors in Guitar Player's 1983 Reader's Poll as Best Guitar Album. In the same balloting, Vaughan racked up 2 more blue ribbons, completely dominating the new talent category and edging out no less than Eric Clapton as Best Electric Blues Player, to become the first Triple Crown winner since Jeff Beck's 1976 hat trick. Over the next 6 years, he ended up with a total of 8 Guitar Player Reader Poll awards. With Texas Flood still selling strongly, Double Trouble released Couldn't Stand the Weather, which hit the Billboard Pop Chart on June 13th, 1984, at 144, leaped up to number 63 in its second week, and bulleted to 37 and 31 in the following 2 weeks. What happened, I guess, he drawled, is that we've come from playing clubs to where we can pretty much fill a 5,000-seat hall now. We just worked our butts off. And play he did. Too hard for a time with alcohol and drugs. problems which he kicked, but never too hard with the music he left in the ears of the world, and the albums on which he can still be heard. Solo works with double trouble, such as Texas Flood, Couldn't Stand the Weather, Soul to Soul, Live Alive, and In Step. But also as a guest on albums of his older brother, Jimmy Vaughan, with the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Bob Dylan, Jennifer Warnes, David Bowie, Lonnie Mack, and others. Vaughan's popularity is as worthy of scrutiny as his phenomenal guitar playing. While numerous blues-based rockers have become guitar heroes after crossing over to the rock camp, including Clapton, Michael Bloomfield, and Jimi Hendrix, Stevie was the first since fellow Texan Johnny Winter, who also eventually drifted into and out of rock and roll, to make the major leagues by sticking with the blues. His videos of Love Struck Baby, From Texas Flood, Couldn't Stand the Weather, and Cold Shot were in steady rotation on MTV's playlist, and Pride and Joy, from his debut LP, received substantial airplay on FM stations. He teamed with George Thorogood for a tribute to Chuck Berry at the 1984 Grammy Awards, and appeared on such unlikely TV shows as Solid Gold. Most people's first exposure to Stevie Ray's searing solos, of course, was via Bowie's Let's Dance. But even though the material was not the type of R&B he had mined in Texas bars for more than a decade, Vaughan's razor-edged leads were pure blues, relying heavily on Albert King for tones and riffs. Texas Flood revealed a debt to blues masters, such as Jimmy Reed, Magic Sam, Lonnie Mack, Buddy Guy, and Hubert Sumlin, and paid that debt with interest. On tour, in support of the album, opening for Coliseum acts such as Men at Work, The Moody Blues, Huey Lewis and the News, and The Police, Stevie riveted audiences with his passionate homages to Jimi Hendrix, including Voodoo Child, Little Wing, and Third Stone from the Sun. While countless guitarists have been influenced by the creative genius of Hendrix, few have attempted to cover any of his songs. There are several obvious similarities between Vaughan and the late Southpaw. Each led a trio, had incredible control of feedback and volume, with a minimum of effects devices, and could sing adequately, but not well enough to make it strictly as a vocalist. But what set Stevie above other pretenders to the Hendrix throne was his ability to play lead and rhythm simultaneously. Like Jimmy, he fired a non-stop barrage of chords, licks, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and unorthodox tricks at the listener. Vaughan's guitar technique didn't just impress, it overwhelmed. Instrumentals such as Rude Mood and Scuttle Budding are textbook studies of the pedal to the metal Vaughan style, while Lenny is reminiscent of Hendrix's most sensitive ballads, and Stang Swang reveals a firm grounding in organ trio guitarists such as Kenny Burrell, Grant Green, and early George Benson. Unlike many other guitar-based trios, Double Trouble overdubbed next to nothing in the studio. The 12-inch pieces of vinyl are still accurate representations of the sort of thing Vaughan and company played on stage from the time the band formed in 1978 until the night Vaughan climbed in for his last flight home. Stevie was only 35 when he died, but his impact will be felt and heard for generations to come. When you first took up guitar, was it blues that you were mainly attracted to? A lot, because of my brother Jimmy. He'd bring home records by BB and Buddy Guy, and he was the one who hit me with Lonnie Mack too. The first record I ever bought was the Wham of That Memphis Man. Jimmy brought home a Hendrix record, and I went, whoa, what is this? I'll never forget that. Did Jimmy show you things on guitar? Or did you just pick up things from hearing him around the house? At first, he taught me a couple of things, and then he taught me how to teach myself, and that's the right way. Your brother was heavily influenced by another Texas bluesman, Freddie King. Did that style rub off on you as well? Yeah, it did. I had that instrumental album of his, Let's Hide Away and Dance Away. Jimmy used to know him pretty well, but Freddie wouldn't talk to me in public. In private, but not in public. I guess I was a young white boy he didn't want to be seen with, and he laughs. I played with him once, sitting around a table when no one else was around. What specifics did you get from various players? I got a lot of the fast things I do from Lonnie Mack. Just the ideas and the phrasing, like on Scuttle Budding. That's really a Lonnie Mack thing. That's dedicated to him. I got a lot of turnarounds from Freddie King. Who were the main blues players you heard on records? Well, let's run them down. There was Buddy Guy, Muddy, of course, and all the various guitar players who were with him, including Jimmy Rogers and Pat Hare, Hubert Sumlin, Lonnie Mack, BB, Albert King, Freddie, Albert Collins, Guitar Slim. He'd just turn it all the way up. I can just imagine people saying, "Slim, why do you always play so loud? Because it sounds like this." Johnny Winter was the first white Texas bluesman to make it on a big scale. Were you influenced much by him? Yes, although I never heard him as much then. I listened to more to people like Albert Collins, Albert and Freddie King, Johnny Guitar Watson. But around 71 or 72, I got to jam a lot with Johnny over at Tommy Shannon's house. That was a little bit after his initial big success. Your playing on Let's Dance isn't along the lines of Texas Flood. It's more like Albert King. I kind of wanted to see how many places Albert King's stuff would fit. It always does. I love that man. When that album first came out, Albert heard it, and he said, "Yeah, I heard you doing all my shit on there. I'm gonna go up there and do some of yours." We were doing this TV show right outside of Toronto, Hamilton, I think. And during the lunch break, Albert went around to everybody in there looking for an emery board. I didn't think anything of it. We were jamming on the last song, Outskirts of Town, and it comes to the solo, and he goes, "Get it, Stevie." I started off, and I look over, and he's pulling out this damn emery board, filing his nails, sort of giving me this sidelong glance. I loved it, looking at me like, I got you swinging by your toes. He's a heavy cat. Did you ever play with your thumb to get an Albert King sound? I play with a pick and a finger. I use the round end of the pick too. You break less of them and don't get tangled up in the strings. Sometimes I play with both together, or I'll palm the pick and use my fingers, or sometimes I'll just Hubert it, like Hubert Sumlin. Is that to get a variety of tones? Different tones, different moods. It depends on how the amps are working that night, how dead the strings are, how much I can hear, how crazy I'm feeling. On Cold Shot, did you play through a Leslie speaker to get that underwater sound? It's a Fender Vibratone, which is basically like a Leslie. It's a 10-inch speaker with a styrofoam rotor in front of it. So the speaker is stationary, but a drum with a slit in it revolves. And then you mic it from both sides. On Couldn't Stand the Weather, were there any tracks where you cut a rhythm part and overdubbed a lead, or vice versa? No. On some of the songs, I just played, and then did the vocal later, which sometimes is a mistake, because you play differently when you're not singing than you would if you were singing along. A lot of times, the licks won't match the phrasing of the vocals. Most of the solos were cut live. I redid one line in Voodoo because my amp went crazy on me. The punch-in didn't come off very well. It still doesn't sound right to me. Texas Flood sounds like there are hardly any overdubs. There aren't. Only if I broke a string or something. So you played the lead and rhythm in the same take, rather than laying down a rhythm track and soloing over it later? Right. We redid a few vocals, but some of them were live, too. That was mainly to go back if a word was left out or not real clear. Plus, we got a better vocal sound by redoing them. I don't think that's cheating too much. Was John Hammond in the studio for the first album? No, he wasn't there at all, except for the mixdown and the mastering. This time, he was there a lot for the recording. Did that affect the recording environment much? He wants you to sound exactly like yourself. He doesn't like you to overproduce. In other words, he does it the other way around in a way. He keeps you sounding like yourself instead of trying to change you, like most producers do. Do you play slide in open tuning? I usually just tune up the G string to A flat and leave everything else the same. How did you go about recreating the sounds you heard on Hendrix records? You just keep listening and trying to find the sound because it's in your hands as much as anything. It's the way you play. There are different techniques to playing everybody's style. And it's not just necessarily the amp or the guitar. It's the way you pick, the way you hold the guitar. For instance, T-Bone Walker played like this more of the time. And he holds the guitar horizontally, away from his body. And the tone is different when you play that way. Can you hear the difference? Holds the guitar against his body and plays the same lick, and he gets a bassier tone. It's the way your fingers hit the strings, and you're more prone to pick closer to the neck when you hold the guitar like T-Bone. Your 59 Strat has the vibrato bar anchored off the bass side of the bridge. Did you set it up that way because Jimi Hendrix's guitar bodies were upside down? Well, I started listening to people and noticed that when Otis Rush used one, he had it on the top. He played upside down. And Hendrix had the guitar upside down, except he strung it regular. It seemed to me that the people who did that the best had it on top. So I moved mine. Sometimes it does get in the way. I've had it tear my sleeve halfway off. So instead of working it with the little finger of your picking hand, it lays right in the middle of your palm. Yeah, and I've got the springs set up so I couldn't move it with my little finger anyway. It's pretty tight, with 4 springs tightened all the way up. That's how I can do Third Stone from the Sun and still be in tune. See, I have my old Strat set up where it won't go up at all. On my newer Strats, the vibrato handles are on the bottom, in the regular place. I have big hands, and I always play bar chords with my thumb wrapped around. What happens a lot of times is my thumb will end up pushing the low E string accidentally. So the wider neck keeps me from doing that. It's a lot easier to get under the strings when you use big strings like I do. You can work yourself to death with those little frets. Instead of the note fading out when you bend a string, it'll get bigger when you bend with the jumbo frets. Do any of your Strats have maple necks? Yeah, Lenny does. It's got a real clear tone, and the pickups are microphonic. You can hear it when you hit the pick guard, but when you play it soft, it sounds great. When I first got the guitar, it had a rosewood fingerboard, but it was thinner, and that bothered me. So I put a copy of a Fender maple neck on there that Billy Gibbons gave me. I like the rosewood necks usually because, for one thing, when you sweat, you don't get blisters. It seems like the finish on a maple neck gets hotter and there's more friction. As hard as I play and as much as I sweat, I get sore enough as it is. There's a fatter sound on the rosewood, as far as I can tell. It's not as bright. The ebony fretboard seems a little bit clearer, but it's fat too. Which guitars have you recorded with most? Lenny on the song Lenny, and everything else has been the 59. I'd like to record with the one with the Dan Electro pickups. I like it a lot. How do you do some of the tricks you do on stage, like getting the whole guitar behind your back so fast? As I'm spinning around, I'm taking the strap loose and the guitar pivots behind my back. And then I rehook it behind my back. It's really playing the same way, except you've got to hold the guitar out a little bit and you just can't see as well. In Third Stone from the Sun, you have the guitar laying on the stage while you straddle it, pulling up on the neck with one hand and on the wang bar with the other. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that anybody do that on their 335. The Stratocaster's a pretty tough thing though. Then I figured out how to get the guitar to rumble. I put it on the middle pickup, turn the tone knob down, grab it by the wang bar, and just shake it on the floor. With the amount of amplification you use, do you still pick fairly hard with your right hand? Yeah, terribly. That's just how I play. Sometimes I literally pull the strings off. I can deaden a set of strings completely after one set because I play them hard. And I do a lot of bass string snapping to get bottom notes like Albert Collins. Sometimes though, I play really soft. That's probably the best Albert King tone I can get. The tendency on the part of most white blues rock artists has been to eventually drift more towards mainstream rock We try to keep it going in both directions. There's no reason for us to leave behind what we've got, you know. But there is a good reason to expand on it. I'd like to keep it as a trio, keep that identity. But I have nothing against playing with great horn players or keyboard players or other guitar players, or more than one drummer even. Stang's swang is still blues, but it's a departure from the type of stuff you're known for. I wrote that 4 or 5 years ago. I like guys like Kenny Burrell and Grant Green a lot. I like Django Reinhardt a lot too, and Wes Montgomery, of course. What's the turnaround on that song? 2 5s? I don't know. I don't know what key I'm in sometimes. I just try to listen. Are you completely self-taught when it comes to any theoretical vocabulary? I don't know any of that stuff. What about the chord voicings you use? I just look for things that sound right. So if you're playing something like, say, a diminished seventh, I don't know it. I almost learned how to read chord charts doing some of those Bowie things. But as soon as I learned how to read the charts, they took the charts away. Most of the time, I'd listen to a couple of run-throughs while he was doing his vocals to get an idea of where the song was going. Then I'd just figure out in my head where this Albert King lick or that Albert King lick would fit.